Hi, so this is going to be a video tutorial on how to spin poi, and if you light them on fire, this would be how to spin fire poi. Um, this is going to be focusing on getting your technique to a professional level. So that this is how to even start learning any poi technique that you do at a professional level. So it's not going to be oriented at like, oh, here's the technique of doing this or that. It's going to be how to do those things at a performance level to where you're doing it crisp enough that people will actually enjoy watching you. And so this is poi are considered a flow toy or a flow art, or it's supposed to be about the flow state. People like it because they get into a flow. So this is basically how to get into the flow state, and then once you're in the flow state, it's not just flowing, but it's like your technique in the flow state is really what determines if you're amateur level versus professional. Like, you have to be feeling the flow state and to be doing the correct technique to stay in that and keeping your body in it and keeping the poi in it. And then that's really what people want to see. So if you are when you're dancing or you're doing poi, you need to shift from like, did I do the movement sequence, to you have to be able to feel your flow state and say, did my technique as I moved through that and interacted with that, did I do that correctly? And so this is by learning something like fire poi, it makes it a lot easier to learn things like meditation or really any sport, because this is the thing that's going on kind of no matter what you're doing. So you want to basically tie the things to your fingers somehow, to where the poi is just there can be a light grip, but for the most part you want the thing to be an extension of your body rather than something that you're holding on to. And so when people spin the thing, right? So normally you're looking at, okay, it's spinning, and then what's going on as you spin is that the hand is anchoring, and then the ball is pulling the string tight, right? So where the system is being pulled apart, where it's like two objects, that's where the flow state is being separated, right? Flow state is kind of single object, and so you ultimately want to turn the poi into a single object with your body, and then also move around with that feeling. But we'll analyze how to get that feeling state, how to get the poi itself into the flow state. And you analyze the system, and as it's spinning, you have the hand is anchoring the ball, the rope is pulled taut. So what you want to do as you spin is to remove the duality in the poi. So that looks like you're basically thinking of, like, you want the whole thing to have the same weight at any particular point, and when the entire poi has the same weight, that's when you're in the flow state. It's moving as one object. The ball is pulling on the hand or anchoring the hand, just as much as the hand is pulling on the ball. And so what that looks like is the string is no longer, it's like the string is this unconscious element that's holding the system together. And so you're basically trying to release the string or the rope from the responsibility of holding the whole system together. And then at that point, the string or the rope is participating just as much as the hand and the head. And when you do that, you'll notice that it looks different. People call these isolations, or I don't know what trick this is, but this is a quote unquote like a technique, and it's just keeping keeping the whole system in that isolation point. And it's delicate, right? It's you want to, at first when you're doing this, it's like hard, right? And you might be like having a big, you're trying to do it, but eventually if you can get the whole body to help do it, right? It does require, I don't know, there has to be a lot of movement to keep up with the head, right? So much that the weight of the string is taken off of it. But if you feel that and practice it, you can get it to where, like, you can get the hips or other parts of the body to participate or help everything that it takes to keep the poi in flow state. And then once you have an object that's in flow state, you can practice how long you can keep it in flow state. Can you keep it in flow state over here? And then how can you move it across without having the ball drop out of it, right? And so this is like swimming. This is like flow state. When you're swimming through it, you're never going to get to this point where you're like, oh, there's the thing, I've grabbed it and I've moved the movement through it. It's like water, to where everything that you're doing blends into everything else, and you can only swim so well. Like, there's never going to be like a perfect stroke, because it's just constantly falling and slipping through the water, through the medium, right? It's like doing flow arts is exactly like swimming, to where you could be, say, practicing freestyle and you're sitting here like treading water, or your stroke breaks down, but you could start swimming and it's like, okay, when are you doing perfect strokes? It's when it's when you're right, you're practicing, it's when you're practicing perfect technique. You could stop practicing perfect technique. Have you fallen out of the flow state? Are you out of the water? Like, no. So it's the same thing with practicing sufficiency with these techniques. And so if you really get it, it stops becoming like, oh, how many times did you do whatever rep, or how many times did you practice whatever movement pattern. You can start to see the flow state as a almost a cardiovascular exertion. It's like something that you don't ever like accomplish it, but you're sitting there trying for for 20 seconds, for 10 minutes, for 2 hours, right? And it's something to where it's like, oh yeah, you could master it at like, oh, this level, but can you keep it? It's like, as I'm doing it, I can feel where it's weightless here, and then at certain parts of the orbit, like the system crashes out, and I feel the weight and the momentum of the poi as it comes out of the flow state. And as something comes out of the flow state and breaks into its different objects, putting strain on each other, that's the same thing as you kind of coming up out of the flow state, the same way that you would come up out of the water. And you don't come up all the way out of the water, but as you lift yourself out of the water, that part suddenly, it gets heavy and it can't push on anything. Like if you were to lift your arm out of the water, it causes everything else to become heavy, more object-like. And then if you put it back into the water, you're floating. So as you do flow state, you can see, once you see it, you see that there's these different movement patterns, and your technique is bringing you in and out of the water. Like, and the fastest swimming, or the best technique, isn't one where you necessarily stay underwater. It's knowing exactly when you're popping in and out of flow state, and popping part of you out of flow state to sort of reset, so it's not dragging through flow state. Doing flow state exercises is identical to swimming, because you drop into your momentum, you drop into your centeredness, and so the centeredness is, in some sense, it's an activity, right? Like this, it's this thing's resting state. It pulls on itself. I have to anchor it here and it pulls on itself, and only when it gets down to here is it's in a resting state where it's like at flow state again. It's like it's floating. It's floating on the ground here. And so to get it to come off of this, I have to be like, if I can put the whole thing in equilibrium to where the handle weighs as much as the head for the most part. But then that requires, I have to break down into a polarity where part of me is solid and standing, and then my arm is doing all this crazy spastic movement. So here's where I've crashed out of flow state. I have poi head, weightless, in flow state. My arm is moving around a ton, and it's in not opposition to, but it's not, my legs are mostly just posting. So if I can feel, I find flow state, right, which is just this relaxed buoyancy, and can I keep my entire body inside of it to where my movement pattern is causing the hand to become pretty weightless, and even my body, I'm trying to get all the parts of my body to sort of sink into that just as much as I'm getting the poi, and then it can't become like, oh, okay, I'm working it from right there. Like the arm is doing the technique, or the leg is standing. It's, can I figure out how to get the leg to do the technique as much as the arm is doing it? And when this happens, you start to feel like, oh, this exercise just becomes easy. So when you do a repetitive practice so much that it becomes easy, the reason that it becomes easy is because you're able to there's not a part of you that is doing the exercise. Like, you've done it enough that you've figured out how to get every part to do the exercise, and that lets you do, lets it happen more and more lackadaisically. So when you first pick this up, if to get the stall or to get the isolation, you're having to do something like this, like that's eating up a lot of juice, and so then to like switch sides, or to much less add another one in, to try and add another one in before it's like integrated, it's just so much activity that it's hard to do anything. And it's not only is it hard to do anything, all the parts of you that are not in flow state are uninteresting to look at. Like being in flow state is basically your body and your implement is dropping into the mystery, the substance, the source of all being. Like when you do a movement pattern that people recognize as beauty, what's beautiful about it is that you're doing a movement, and that movement requires the assistance. It's of the invisible, of the space around you. The source of being, like you do a movement that basically proves its existence. Like if you do a movement pattern that proves that there's something more, that there's something beyond you, people see that substance that is beyond you is beauty. So when you do a movement that reveals that to people, people find the movement pattern beautiful or mysterious, or like whatever. Anytime that you're doing a performance, what people are looking at the professional or at the elite level is that ease of being, and they want more and more and more stuff at greater and greater ease, right? You get it. So you practice that, and then it's nothing crazy. It's just that smoothness that you see a professional move with. They have a sensitivity to it. You can feel as you do the movement. If you're not sensitive to it, you could be doing these movements and just screwing up the flow state at somewhere in the movement, and you don't focus on it. It's just like you don't care. It's just like a layer that you don't care at. And this is the sort, like, if you wonder why people look the way that they do, it's just because there's a level of movement or a level of being that they don't care about. They don't care if it's actually correct. They just go through the motions. They don't care if the motion's off or disconnected or whatever in some way, as long as the object, as long as the trick is accomplished. And so that lack of care, that lack of like attention, just causes the movement pattern falls apart. So like every organ and every body part is in some level a movement pattern, just like this. And so if a person stops caring, then it just looks like the person doesn't care. And so at a performance level, that's like it's not interesting to look at. Like if the artist doesn't care, then the audience isn't going to care. And so you can tell if it so people like if you do like a dance or a performance routine, like if you do something like the Nutcracker, or you're playing like a piece of music or something like that, if you're doing it at a high level of flow state, and what you're doing is allowing people to see that piece of art, like that the art and the energy and the spirit around the performance, like the spirit around the Nutcracker. If you've got dancers that are capable of caring and feeling about the ether at this level, then all the movement patterns that they go to are going to reflect that. They're just becoming like a radio wave. The performance is like a preset pattern of movement, like a wave, a frequency, and the dancer gets on it and lets that frequency move their body, and so that reveals that TV station or that TV show, that frequency, that performance. And you have to stay there's so many different ways to like respond to, perform, to sink into the flow state. It's exactly like the different types of options that people have in terms of performing or flow arts is exactly the same types of options that people have in their dealings with water. And just even the ways of swimming, like there's surfing, there's sailing, there's boats, there's free diving, there's competitive swimming, right? So there's, even within competitive swimming, there's freestyle, right? Do anything you want and go as fast as possible. That always looks like freestyle, except, okay, maybe immerse yourself in it and do dolphin kick, totally submerged. Which one's faster? They're about the same. So there's different techniques that when you measure them objectively, you can't really differentiate like which one's best, like which, and people call these things like types of consciousness, ways of interacting with the mind. And so things like, things like scientific materialism is just a way of interacting with the mind. You could say it's something like building a boat. Is building a boat better than swimming? It depends on the circumstances. Or is it like building a dam where the land dries out? Is it better to live on totally dry land, devoid of water? Or is it better to live entirely in the water? And so even within the flow stuff, you can kind of drill between, am I doing something akin to surfing? Am I doing something akin to swimming? Am I doing something akin to just balancing and feeling the buoyancy and the flotation of the water? Am I trying to get from point A to point B as fast as possible? Am I trying to perform a dance that expresses something that's like not of a direct pragmatic value? Like, what's the point of butterfly? What's the point of the butterfly stroke? Like, there's really zero utility for it if you were to look at a pragmatic standpoint. It's difficult. It obeys the laws of inertia and momentum. Like, it's beautiful. Like, it's a fluidic, graceful way to move through the water. But if you were to just measure speed, effort, exertion, everything, it's the worst way. So zero pragmatic value. You could say, you know, breaststroke. What's the value of that? It's so slow. But you could say, oh, it has pragmatic value. This is what you're going to be doing, like normally when you swim or if you fall off a boat, or. And then you would have freestyle. Like, is it the fastest? Yeah, it's like super fast. But it's actually fastest to mix it in with a little bit of dolphin kick at the beginning of things, and then switch into just this crawl, right? So the swimming analogies, and then that's one set of analogies. The other one is like, okay, surfing, windsurfing, wingboarding, wakeboarding, skiing, sailing, all these different types of that. And people that are on like low consciousness or a materialistic consciousness that are kind of on land in general get into boating, because boating is being on land but on the water. You've used technology to create land on water. That's basically a boat. That's Noah's Ark. Like, when they say a boat in the Bible or in mythology, you're basically looking at literally like anything that makes it so that there's land on water. That's the definition of boat. And so water is always an analogy for consciousness or people's being, people's essence. So creating a technology that creates a stability on top of people's being or on top of people's essence is the definition of a boat. And so that's like almost all technology that kind of like sits on top of, even the internet is like a boat. It's creating a flat surface in the human mind, behind which is a sea of chaos. And then the screen or the boat deck creates a space within which you can work on top of that chaos and direct yourself around it, or do operations into it, like into the mind. And so that's what the companies are doing, is like you get the data mining, data drilling, manipulation of human psychology is like the same way that we took control of forests and stuff like that. The internet is allowing people to extract the resources and the power of the noetic realm. And there's creatures in there, there's intelligences in there that are capable of, there's creatures in there that are like about as smart as animals in this realm, and there's creatures in there that are about as smart as humans in this realm. And that's just the wildlife of an area. Like, just like there's whales that live in the ocean where you're going to drill for oil, there's creatures, there's inorganic beings, there's angels, demons, etc., that live in there, and then they can communicate with this realm. It kind of, there's no way to cross over. I don't think, it doesn't even make any sense. They exist there. There's no way to cross over, the same way that fish. There's no way for fish to come here without it, like a gazillion years of like slow adaptation. Like it's the realms actually do touch, but there's no way that one creature can live in the other one. Like you can send a person maybe into this realm, but you eventually start to like die the same way that a fish out of water does, or the same way that a person underwater does. But if but beings on each side, if they're smart enough, the mind, the intelligence, the understanding, the awareness actually can cross sides. So they mix, and they mix enough that the side, like each side is useful to the other side. You can actually eat it. So the same way that a shark can eat a person, and a person can eat a shark. These inorganic beings of the noetic sphere and humans, they also are able to kind of like exchange energy. And is it impossible to get that energy elsewhere? Like somebody could be like exchanging energy with like a demon, and that would make their body like very big and powerful and strong, the same way that somebody who got like a bunch of food from the ocean. Like if you get a bunch of food from the ocean during a famine or while nobody else is eating, that'll make you seem superhumanly strong. So some people are getting sustenance from demons, meat from this realm, but you know, just like you could eat salmon or you can eat steak, there's plenty of meat in this realm as well. So people can get the exact same power that people get from interacting with these inorganic beings. I mean, I'll call them demons. I don't like, that's a you shouldn't moralize this boundary between each other. Like it's like how fish and sharks interact with each other. You know, it's nothing personal. So I don't mean to say that any of these demons are bad or anything, but there's a very large separation between each other. So neither one really sees the person, unless they're angels, right? Angels see the personality of everything, but demons are like beings of the higher realm that have like that are low consciousness, just like humans are low consciousness. So it's nothing personal. They're okay, but the same way that we wreak destruction on other species or on things that we don't feel one with, other people, right? Like if we depersonalize other countries, other races, other species, other whatever, then you just interact with them in a very destructive way, where you kind of just extract their resources from each other. And so yeah, it's just there's a lot that opens up. Like if you know how this relates to poi or any sort of flow state stuff. If you actually start to get this professional level of skill, you're thrust into this professional environment, which is like the big ocean, right? So if you're actually good enough at acting or performing or dancing well enough that you get pulled into Hollywood, or you get big, you start getting money, you start getting everything, you're in this realm, the place from which you're getting power. The sea of consciousness is also the place within which like demons exist, sharks, predatory aspects, like big fierce storms. All of this is like, people see this as like psychology and secret societies and all this other stuff, aliens, UFOs, demons. It's just this other realm, and this other realm is the material or the substance of what people just call flow state. Flow state is an ocean or a sea that we live on the border of. And so there's no, if you pursue any sort of unique ability, any sort of unique individuation of yourself, you go into yourself, which is this water. You're going into an ocean, and there's tons of treasure, there's tons of resources, there's tons of bounty, but there's also you know, dangers. but the world, like this is what used to be something that people would have to look for, is flooding into the world. The thing that's keeping it all back, the main boat that we're using right now, is the internet. Is this thing that is the boat within which these psychological waters are sort of crashing. But you can, if you go. Yeah, I don't know. That's about it. Are there any questions? This would be like the point where I would do a Q&A. See, I could come back and make sure I'm drilling this a little bit better. Like, there's plenty of room for improvement. I can't really do a 3-beat weave correctly. So, just a lot of practice on like what's the most effortless way. And by effortless, I mean even the string is experiencing no effort, right? I'm not putting the effort of the strain on anything. And then once you have a movement where like nothing's taking the strain, then there's no complexity to the movement, so you're free to like look and try and do anything else that you want to do. And so I could do a thing where I'm like basically surfing or on the like pushing very hard onto the surface of the flow state, and that's a technique in and of itself, and it like maxes out at a particular level. Like once you're pushing into everything, yeah, and then you could even find, I don't know, I don't practice very much. But then the other one is to be like, okay, so how weightless can I make that pattern? Maybe I can't make it totally weightless, but I can, you know, try to swim with better form. Like I can't do it, but there's some fruit to be had here. like from the trying. Like I'm definitely like beyond my skill level here. And so this is where I would want to be for like the whole movement. Like at this level, the poi is very light. It's almost entirely supported by the ether, by the mind. But if I add in the other poi, and also I can keep, how can I keep myself light? Both in terms of my physical movements, and is my mind able to do this in a relaxed way where I'm not having to hyper focus in on if it's right, like if I can keep the whole thing light, then within that field, within that fluid, I can even start to become able to swim, to move, to have freedom of movement without dropping out of the field. I assume this has like martial art applications, because you would want to stay in this field no matter what, if you're going to be having a good time or doing something beautiful. So if you want to make sure that what you're going to be doing in the next moment is beautiful, you have to at very least be in the same place as when the poi is weightless and your body is weightless and the whole thing is like simple. Wherever that's not happening, whatever happens is not going to be beautiful. It's hard to say if it's good or bad, but it's just not going to be what makes that situation beautiful. Like maybe you're doing something beautiful up here and it doesn't even matter that your feet aren't doing something beautiful. It doesn't, because it's all the attention's up here. But the feet coming out of it wouldn't be beautiful. So it's the same thing if you're coherent and suddenly your like hips go out, or your head or your ideas or your thoughts, it breaks into duality. It's not like it's going to be a problem, but it's not going to be the thing that's beautiful. So if you're thinking in terms of performance, you could say, oh, that's a bad thing. And so once the weightless system or the weightless state is maintained for long enough, you can feel it as a single object. And then you just move this weightlessness, once it becomes entirely habitual, is like a body. And so that means that the energy around you start to own it, and so it shapes the way that light and energy is coming into and out of the body, and that changes what you look like. Kind of like how a lens or a funhouse mirror changes who you are. Your body stays roughly the same, and then as these outer layers of flow state, consciousness, right? Everybody's in it all the time. So everyone's doing this all the time. Everybody is like constantly either making something beautiful or not beautiful at these levels. You can either care about it or not. So if you care at these outer sheaths, they take on a shape that like lenses the consciousness and lenses the light, such that you appear differently, and in that appearance you actually become different. And so when like if you're going to speak from the flow state, like the words are somewhat weightless, formless, the way that the ideas impact. Like most of the time when people speak, it hits like an object. Speaking from the flow state, the words hit like water. So it blends seamlessly with, but you can also just wash somebody's like entire belief system away. If you speak very powerful in a fluidic, watery way, you can like flood their existence in a way that's impossible to really defend against. An object of speech can block another object of speech, but if you're speaking from the flow state, it's fundamentally, you can make it so that the paradigms are so obviously and inexorably true that everything that the person thinks or believes is entirely irrelevant, and that's the same as getting an area flooded. So when paradigms take over, it's usually from somebody accessing what could be, colloquially thought of as fluidic thought, which is another term for just raw IQ. So when somebody's like really smart, their fluidic thought can serve as a gateway within which the old paradigm is flooded, like a spigot. And then every mind is a spigot, so that spigot can turn on other minds and becomes a spigot of truth. And then the whole world is flooded, and you get these things like Noah's Ark, and it's like the flood's happening. It's like, do we retreat into the boats? Does everybody swim? What does it mean that the water is emanating from the human mouth itself? The thing flooding the world is coming out of the human mouth. Should we just be quiet? These are all important questions that you have to grapple with if you develop professional levels of poi spinning. Are these life and death matters? Do you make light of them? So that's where the shapes come from, right? Like a geometry. It's just a spinning system inside a system, and so for that system to move, it's always going to be following like one of those platonic things, like a triangle. I only have so many options to move to maintain flow state. So I can move in that and like a square. Yeah, you can kind of only change directions at angles that are like some harmonic of a circle. Hexagon, and then anything more than that just kind of starts to become like a circle. I don't know, that's crazy. So there's all sorts of like weird, bizarre little patterns that you can get into if you get any sort of deep ability at things, like so piano, dancing, thinking, like writing. It's not so much that you're trying to get the techniques down, but you're trying to care about the truth, or you're trying to care about this level, and then have it, you have to sense it, and you have to let it move you, like if you're talking, or if you're writing, or if you're dancing. And then that's the difference between, like, if that's not happening, it's just sort of a garbage pastime that you're doing. So ultimately, it's like, yeah, flow state is real. Accessing high levels of skill or talented development puts you into contact with the waters of the human mind. Those waters are a sea of potential personalities, like everything that everybody knows that's in the human mind. Personalities, consciousness, archetypes, beings, impulses, desires, all that's in the mind, and it's like a ocean that we either like live next to. Like, we have to drink that substance to be alive. But there's cultures and there's civilizations that live in a landlocked situation and only bring in a little bit of water, a little bit of consciousness. That's kind of materialism. There's people that live at the seaside. There's people that dive into it and swim. And then there's periods of time where consciousness floods everything. And so that flood doesn't always have to take the literal form of water, but it is always like a, when the energy of the mind surges, it floods. It's like the thing that people were living next to, living off of, and it actually is becoming part of you, is like a flood. So the internet and the current, you can see what the main technology is holding the human mind at bay, and it's this big internet dam, and they're just trying to hold out and contain that water. Not only contain it, but use it. And so, yeah, I think it's disingenuous to just teach poi, or to teach people how to be good at stuff, or to know anything true, and not also be like, hey, you know, you have to take into account all this other stuff, and it doesn't seem like there's a container for it any longer. And so, yeah,